Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, well, we've got a lot to cover in about 60 minutes here. Quite a bit has happened since we last spoke. Of course, the 53-man roster was announced. But now, as of today, as of this recording on Wednesday the 9th, we have just found out that a slight change, well, not necessarily a slight change, a pretty big change is going to be happening to that 53-man roster with Danielle Hunter going on IR. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we'll do our typical Vikings Packers preview heading into week one and finish up with our picks for the week. So one note here is that with this regular season starting, shows will be moved from Tuesday to Thursday. So you get two shows a week posting on Tuesday and Thursday morning. So keep an eye out for that on the Climbing the Pocket Network, as well as Daily Norseman, and then iTunes and everywhere else where I normally say at the end of the show. So let's just jump into it here and start off with this big news. So we were planning on just, kind of giving a brief synopsis or our synopsis of the 53-man roster, given that I assume that many of you guys have already heard enough about the 53 and kind of formed your own opinions on where the Vikings stand. But with this news that just dropped this afternoon, Danielle Hunter being placed on IR, which it's not as severe as it once was with the rule changes. So Danielle Hunter will miss at least 3 games instead of this typical 6, which is somewhat good news, or at least relative to the situation that is. But that's a big hole. So Drew, your initial thoughts on the news coming out that Hunter is going to be not only missing Sunday's game, but the following Sunday and the following Sunday after that as well.
Yeah, that sucks. There's no way around that, and I think it gives a little bit more insight into why the Vikings did trade for Yannick Ngakoue. You have now a stud pass rusher. I wouldn't put Ngakoue at the Neil Hunter level, but
Right.
it does make sense that they wanted some insurance there, knowing that Hunter. They kept it pretty quiet for what it's worth. That he had this neck injury apparently that. For the while, I think the longest time the rumor was that it was a knee injury or whatever. But first of all, a neck injury, not great. That sounds like something that could linger for more than 3 weeks. But
Also a dangerous injury too.
right. So it makes sense that it's to get Ngakoue in there, and now Ifeadi Odenigbo on the other side sort of still has that opportunity as a starter, which I know he probably initially was pretty bummed about when the Vikings did trade for Ngakoue. But I think we're both pretty excited about Odenigbo. I think we both think that he showed a lot of flashes last year and a little bit of role, and I think if he expands on that with a full-time starting role this year, I think he can really put up and be productive and put up some solid numbers. So it sucks. You're losing a top 5 edge defender in the sport for what I think could be, 4, 5, 8 games. Like, it's not going to be something that's I think it's going to be at least 3 weeks for this neck thing. So don't love that. I think the Vikings have, thanks to Rick Spielman and his hoarding of draft picks, they're able to get Ngakoue here so that they could minimize the loss that otherwise would be if Hunter was absent.
Yeah, so that point right there, that trade for Yannick Ngakoue certainly looks a lot different in this lens now, right? Knowing that Hunter is going to be out for the first 3 weeks, it certainly makes sense for the Vikings to trade a second and a fifth, especially considering that when Teddy Bridgewater went down, they went ahead and traded a first to replace the quarterback position with Sam Bradford in the past. So there is precedent to suggest that when the Vikings feel like one of their key playmakers is missing, that they are willing to go out and get a big piece. Now, they did that, and there's a couple of kind of side pieces where you can silver linings, if you will, right? So you're missing Hunter for 3 weeks, like Drew said. There's no way around that. That sucks. But that being said, you do give the opportunity to Odenigbo to see what he's got, right? We've seen him in spot starter duty. I don't even want to. It's not really even spot starter duty. It's more rotational duty throughout his career. Now he gets the opportunity to play at least 3 games. As Drew stated, a neck injury, probably longer, or potentially longer. I probably should say. You don't want to mess with neck injuries ever. Could potentially be career threatening if it's a nerve or something like that. I'm not a doctor, but I wouldn't want my neck messed up. So, um, you know, the opportunity here for Odenigbo to get some snaps and some quality snaps at that opposite, a very good pass rusher, as you said, in Ngakoue. The Vikings could, theoretically, if all goes well, Hunter comes back, hopefully at full strength. You've got Ngakoue kind of acclimated to the system a little bit more, and you got 3 weeks of experience, playing alongside the guys in Minnesota. And then potentially you have Odenigbo as well, who's, playing efficiently, hopefully. And you've got three different pieces there that you can rotate in and out and have a really dangerous pass rushing attack. So, it's a small silver lining, especially when we're talking about maybe the Vikings' best player, not just their best defensive player, but their best player, period, being out for 3 weeks. But, Hunter's not the only piece, and I think the Vikings have done a pretty good job to sort of, put a Band-Aid on this, despite the fact that these first 3 games in kind of a strange season are probably more important than ever.
Right, and I've spoken and written too, if you're following me with my written stuff at length about how important the Packers game is going to be, just because divisional games clearly made a big difference for the Vikings last year, and maybe was the difference between a first round bye or a division title and the wild card spot. And then of course Tennessee week 3 is the other big game that I think those are the two biggest, most important home games of the season for Minnesota. With those two opponents, I think that's definitely going to be the toughest 2 games that they have. So it's I don't you're going to lose potentially your defensive MVP. You can make the argument for Kendricks or Smith, but big loss. Ngakoue's there to kind of put a Band-Aid on it, I guess, but you can still sort of feel that wound there. So I don't have anything else to add besides I do trust Andre Patterson and Mike Zimmer to be effective with their unique pass rushing schemes, defensive schemes. They're best in the business as far as that's concerned. So if anybody can kind of get through this without a big loss, it's going to be the Zimmer Patterson duo.
Absolutely. And you've got Odenigbo, who's been preparing to be the starter, right? He's been taking first team reps up until 2 weeks ago when that trade went down. So he's more than prepared. The Vikings are ready to deal with this situation. It's just simply not a situation I don't think any of us want to, want it to be a reality. But unfortunately, here we are. But there are 52 other players on this roster, and like I said at the top of the show, we haven't really discussed the initial 53-man announcement. So I want to spend the majority of this show talking about the Vikings and Packers matchup, since obviously I think that's why most of you are here. And of course, with the NFL season starting this week, everyone's excited about that and, has moved on from this. But just give me a couple bullet points, things that really stood out to you about the initial 53. Obviously in 4 weeks, there might be 10 guys, a 10-person difference here. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just things that really stood out to you about this release, whether it's, the depth chart itself or the players who were, kind of the fringe guys who made the roster.
Right. I think the big one is the safety position. There's 2 of them. And then after that, there's nothing, and it's something that I haven't seen, and we're kind of all waiting for that corresponding move, right? Some sort of, signing a player that was waived by another team, like a veteran, because there's so much going on with the league right now. They did bring back, and they have, the added practice squad, of course, but on the 53-man roster and going into Sunday, as it appears now, as far as I know, is that Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris are the only 2 safeties on the roster. So
that could change with the Hunter news. There is that.
And that could. So there's, I think I saw somewhere that, Harrison Hand would be the next safety up, which you're really hoping that those 2 guys don't get hurt is basically the point here. And then, Dan Chizina, is that how you say his name? The speedy guy from Penn State.
I believe so, yeah.
I don't know how to say his last name for sure. I've been reading about it a lot, but I haven't actually heard somebody say it. But the speedy receiver / safety / receiver again, back and forth.
He kind of looks like you, Drew.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment, I think.
He does. It's not a bad thing. He just kind of looks like you, yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of a surprise too. I think when people saw him kind of flopping positions, they're like, okay, he's kind of an afterthought. And then
Right.
with Alexander Hollins having such a great camp, you kind of thought he would slip in there as a receiver, and that is not the case. So those are kind of the two big takeaways for me. Otherwise, most of the rest of the roster kind of filled out sort of as expected. Maybe the one other surprising note would be like Aviant Collins maybe not being on the 53 man and on the offensive line there, but
especially with Vikings media kind of highlighting him as a focus player this summer, then he just doesn't make the team. That's definitely a big piece. The two things that stood out to me, first and foremost, were kind of confirmation of what we were discussing earlier this year with Justin Jefferson starting out as probably the number 3, number 4 receiver listed on this depth chart. Obviously, B.C. Johnson getting that number 2 role opposite Adam Thielen to start with Tajay Sharp, probably the first guy.
We should note, by the way, I think this I've learned based on some fantasy football drafts the last couple of weeks that teams like almost universally do that with their rookies. They put them lower on the depth chart. Like J.K. Dobbins in Baltimore is the 4th string running back right now.
Right.
Cam Akers with the Rams is number 3. Like this is a common thing, at least for offensive playmakers. So for Justin Jefferson to be at 3, I don't think it's anything. It's nothing to worry about if you're concerned about him being, a solid player in the league eventually. It's just the way it goes for rookies.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's true, but we did receive confirmation of that. So Jefferson starts the season as a rotational guy. The other big thing that really stood out for me is the Vikings drafted 15 players back in April. 14 of them remain with this team in some capacity, right? So the only one was Brian Cole, the safety from Mississippi State. He's the only guy of the 14 guys that Rick Spielman actually drafted, keeping in mind, of course, that all but one undrafted guy was released and not added to the practice squad. But, you consider the fact that Nate Stanley makes his team on the practice squad. Josh Metellus, a guy I gave no chance. Kyle Hinton, Blake Brandel, a couple of names that I don't think many people know a whole lot about given the media coverage situation this year. And then you got the Michigan State kid, Kenny Willekes, making the team kind of by default on injured reserve. So all of those guys, and then of course KJ Osborne is going to step in and play a big special teams role here. A guy that I think was sort of a fringe draft player when he was drafted, I suppose. And Harrison Hand also makes the team outright as well. So that's awesome to see all the young guys that despite the situation they were in, still be able to perform well enough on tape to give the Vikings enough reason to keep them on the roster. And then two other small notes here. The quarterback situation, kind of adding on to what I was just saying. Nate Stanley makes the team, but so does Jake Browning on the practice squad.
Yeah.
And then Sean Mannion, of course, remains on the 53-man roster, just to my displeasure. But the Vikings are keeping 4 quarterbacks essentially as a result of the kind of the COVID situation, and they want to have at least that many guys able to operate the playbook. So. You essentially keep 4 quarterbacks, 2 of course being in the 53. And the final note here, Abdullah made the roster again somehow. And this is one that just doesn't really make sense to me ever. I don't get it. I didn't get it last year when he was just like, a return guy essentially and a number 3 running back. And you have Mike Boone, who, he was okay when he was asked to be the starter, but he was pretty good beforehand. So you keep Osborne and Abdullah. That's kind of the one head scratcher for me. The rest of this roster looks about as advertised, but that one to me was a little bit strange. And then, of course, I could go on and on about Sean Mannion making the roster, but I won't do that to you today.
Yeah, and one of the things I maybe wanted to get a quick take from you is, with like Josh Rosen, for example, when he was let go, is that something that you think the Vikings should have maybe been aggressive about it? Maybe they were, and he just preferred Tampa Bay. I guess we don't really know that, but yeah.
And for Sean Mannion, always, 100% of the time. The only thing is with Josh Rosen is, and again, this is hearsay, 100%, but people don't like his attitude. And I have never really I might have gotten a condescending vibe from Josh Rosen, but I've never thought of him as like a bad locker room guy. But if that is the case, then no, I don't want to bring him in for sure. I don't care how talented he is on paper. But
right, and we don't know that's something that as fans sitting in our living rooms, whatever,
it could be completely ridiculous.
Yeah, but I was just wanted a take on that because that was one thing that I know some Vikings fans looked at and thought, well, Josh Rosen or Sean Mannion, one guy hasn't really been given a chance at all as a first round top 10 pick, and one has been a journeyman backup for a long time. Anyway, and then I didn't even think about your point about Abdullah and Osborne there, but that does make some sense. So they clearly like Abdullah as a leader, though, right? I think that throughout the summer with the social justice initiatives, he's kind of taken the lead on that. And I think it's rubbed off on a lot of the team as well. So I think from a leadership locker room standpoint, you kind of want to keep Abdullah in there. But your point about the football logistics of, what's his role going to be if they're already added Osborne as a return guy, and you already have, Cook, Madison, Mike Boone in the backfield, having a fourth running back as a roster spot might be, not the best usage of your spots, but we'll see what happens when the season kicks off here.
Absolutely. And, like I said before, the roster on September 2nd was when it was released. The roster on September 2nd very rarely looks the exact same on October 2nd, right? So there could be a number of changes here.
Maybe even more so the case this year. With
I would assume that too, yeah.
Very fast-moving COVID list and IR only 3 weeks, and the expanded practice squad rosters and everything else. Like it's going to be moving quickly. You're going to see that transaction wire is going to be a lot. It's going to basically be a traffic jam all year long compared to previous years.
Absolutely. I completely agree. All right. So I said I wanted to focus the meat of the show on the Vikings matchup with the Packers here. And let's do that. Let's jump right into that and spend, the majority of the rest of our time here discussing this upcoming matchup. So, of course, it is a home game, if you want to call it that, right? They are playing at US Bank Stadium with no fans. So that is the week 1 situation for the Vikings with their rival NFC North team, the Packers, coming to town. Couple of things here before we even get into this. First of all, with the media coverage being basically non-existent, it's difficult to really get a good gauge on both of these teams. Obviously, there are some good things with the Vikings that we can obviously see from what the team has showed us. And there's some bad things, too, of course, with the Hunter news. And you can say the same thing about just about every other team in the NFL, Packers included. So this is going to be interesting because this really is the first time that we've done a preview without much to really go off of.
Yep. No preseason games, no even looking at camp besides a few highlights that the team tweets or shares, on their social channels, which of course they're going to promote their own team versus anything else. But yeah, this is absolutely, it's what we're kind of going off of is sort of our perceptions of the teams last year kind of going into the offseason. So like, I kind of thought, and I think you would agree with me, that Green Bay was sort of it was an anomaly, right? Like they didn't dominate teams the way a 13-3 team should be dominating teams, and that's kind of why both of us think, okay, they're going to sort of come back to earth. Water will find its level there. And so, to me, I think these are two very evenly matched teams, right? I think I've said throughout the offseason, the NFC North could be one with a 9-7 record. And I think it'll be Minnesota or Green Bay at that spot. I think we did a quick schedule preview and we predicted each game, and I think I ended up actually at 10-6. But something in there I think will win the North. I don't think Green Bay is a 13-3 team. No. They certainly didn't draft like one, trying to win now. And then Minnesota 10-6 last year, but I think the pieces gone, specifically Stephon Diggs, and now Danielle Hunter would suggest that they're not quite at that level. But who's to say right now? I think the Vikings and Packers, as it pertains to this rivalry, are very evenly matched right now. The games last year dictate or suggest that, because basically outside of one quarter in that first game last year, it was pretty evenly matched across the board there.
Absolutely. And I guess you could say that last quarter as well, when Adam Jones kind of ran away with that game in week 16.
I won a $500 fantasy football championship with that touchdown, so I'm not
I did too.
Completely upset about that Aaron Jones touchdown.
Yeah. I completely agree. And it was too bad because I had Mike Boone as well, and I was hoping it'd be Mike Boone who would finish it off for me.
Yeah.
But of course, it was Adam Jones. So, all right. So I'm with you. A lot of similarities between these two teams in terms of what their ceiling is and their potential. But let's get into the individual position groups here for the Packers. Take a deeper look into how the Vikings match up. Since, for what it's worth, granted, we are going off of the least amount of coverage we've ever had, but this is also a team that you and I and the rest of you listeners are probably the most familiar with. I mean, I hate the Packers, and I'm sure most of you do as well. And what that means is that I follow them like a hawk. I'm curious about everything that they do. I'm curious about the players they bring in. I follow them about as hard as they follow the Vikings, just because I want to know if they suck.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Seriously.
Um, so that's the good news here. And so we're pretty familiar with a lot of these, at least the household names, right? The big ones that are going to pop up during this offensive overview. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, we've been talking about him for half a decade. Aaron Jones, we spent a lot of time on last year. Devontae Adams, of course, you all know how good of a wide receiver he is. There are some retooled pieces here, but let's start with Rodgers here, because the Vikings have historically defended him pretty well for the most part. And I'm not just talking about the broken collarbone game that a lot of kind of not so awesome Vikings fans love to push on Packers fans. I'm talking about his entire career against Mike Zimmer. It just simply has not gone very well, or at least relative to his standards. So, does that change this year? Are you with the cornerback situation and the Rodgers' ability to pick apart specific pieces on defenses as well as anyone in the league? Maybe not named Tom Brady. The Vikings have Holton Hill and Mike Hughes trotting out there for sure, and you'll probably see some Cameron Dantzler and Jeff Gladney as well. And I feel like that's dangerous with a veteran, a very smart quarterback, a very savvy quarterback, and Aaron Rodgers coming to town.
Yeah, it is. I tend to lean on the point you made about Rodgers against Zimmer. The Packers, I can't remember the last time they've really run up the score on Minnesota. I think it probably was 2016. It had to have been that Lambeau game in 2016 when the Vikings DBs sort of gave up, and I think there was some speculation, locker room issues there with Newman and Rhodes maybe, but
that is
a poll, by the way. That is a poll, by the way. That is some memory going on in the brain right there. But that's the last time I remember the Packers offense looking stellar against the Vikings, and I might be wrong if I'm trying to think, but I mean 2018. The Vikings should have won both of those games. You get Daniel Carlson missing 3 times from like 30 yards in that first game. Yep. And then they pretty easily handle him at US Bank Stadium. And then last year, the Packers offense wasn't great either game. Aaron Jones had a couple good games, of course, with the long touchdown in the second game to put the dagger. But, I mean, it hasn't been Rodgers beating the Vikings for, years now. And so I'm not as worried about him. And you know me enough to know that I've been a big Aaron Rodgers guy for a long time. Right. He's been, in his prime. I think he was the best quarterback of all time in his prime. And I clearly, if you look at the numbers, you just watch Packers football games, he's not in his prime anymore. And it seems like Green Bay too is sort of taking the opportunities away from him and sort of limiting that as well. And they're kind of playing into the hands of the running game. And it kind of shows that too when they drafted A.J. Dillon. So I'm not as worried about Rodgers. And truth be told, I've already bet on the under for this game. So I don't have a lot of faith really in either quarterback right now to put up a bunch of points. I think it's going to be a defensive game, which I think plays into the hands of Mike Zimmer in the way he likes to coach.
It's certainly a fair takeaway. The thing that worries me about Rodgers, a couple pieces really, is one, he can still move, right? He still moves around in the pocket as well as anyone in the NFL. And, well, I guess I'm not named Lamar Jackson, that is. But Rodgers is dangerous in that way to every team. But with Danielle Hunter out, that makes me just a little bit more nervous. Yeah. Of course, Ngakoue's specialty is pass rushing, and he's not as great of a run defender. But Rodgers is pretty quick. He moves very, very well.
Savvy.
He is savvy, and he manipulates the pocket extremely well. It makes me nervous with a guy who has 2 weeks in the Vikings playbook, and Odenigbo, who I have confidence in. But I don't have 3 sack performance confidence in. I'm hoping that he can be effective as a player getting pressure. So that in itself makes me nervous because the Vikings don't have enough of it in the secondary at the cornerback position if pressure's not getting home consistently, right? The good news is as we get into this offensive line here, there are some flaws and some holes that the Vikings can potentially pick apart. But you think about the defensive line that they're trotting out there now. Ngakoue, Odenigbo, Jaleel Johnson, and Shamar Stephen, that just doesn't sound good enough to me to slow down Aaron Rodgers. You might be able to neutralize him, but I don't see a definitive advantage like the Vikings normally do with that matchup. Now, the Vikings still have Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, so you have the ability to kind of take away that shutdown. And also confuse him as well with those two, very athletic and savvy linebackers, patrolling the middle there. But that all being said, Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers, and that back shoulder throw to Devontae Adams.
Oh, that's good. That's the thing
That,
we should by now already know that's going to happen 4, 5, 6 times in this game.
right.
Adams going to get, that's one of those two, like, it's not even a guardable, defendable throw or play. Like if the timing's right, that can't be stopped. So that's going to happen 4 or 5 times. And I feel like at this point, I've gotten used to just surrendering Adams, 7, 8 catches for 70, 80 yards and a touchdown in the Vikings-Packers matchup. It seems like it happens every year, and it's been on Xavier Rhodes. And so that kind of leads sort of to the next point of the discussion here, I think where you were maybe leading to was the cornerback spot. Are we worried about it? I'm not really, and I think it's just because, I'm okay with Adams getting his, right? I think that's going to happen. And I have a level of confidence in the other guys to shut down whoever else the Packers receivers are, which is, Allen Lazard's a big boy at 6'5". Marquise Valdes-Scantling is a speedy guy, but neither one of them are very polished or productive in their careers. And so it's working the same way, right? I think, Vikings have Thielen and then a bunch of kind of unproven guys. The Packers have Adams and a bunch of unproven guys. So it kind of goes both ways there. I would imagine the Packers are thinking the same way as let Adam Thielen get his and make BC Johnson or Tajay Sharp or Justin Jefferson beat us.
Right.
And I think that's what I kind of would like the Vikings to do is, pay attention to Adams and leave your other guys singled against Lazard or Marquise Valdes-Scantling or whoever else is over there, and let Rodgers try and pick that one apart.
Yeah, I agree. If you're right, in Devontae Adams just kind of shoots for, we'll say 85 yards on 8 catches and a touchdown.
I'd be okay with that. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Especially considering that it's Holton Hill that's slated to line up against him head to head, right? I'm sure he'll get coverage over the top from Anthony Harris, but that's kind of the head to head matchup to keep an eye on. If Hill keeps him under 100 yards, and Lazard, St. Brown, Valdes-Scantling, or Malik Taylor, who I don't even know, if none of those guys make a name for themselves in week 1, and Adams just kind of does his thing, the Vikings should be in a pretty good position to win, assuming that they're able to get pressure on Rodgers to some degree. And you look at this front 5 that they're going to be trotting out. Now, this isn't a bad group by any means. There's still a couple of really nice pieces there, with David Bakhtiari, of course, being one of the best left tackles in the league, Corey Linsley being a former Pro Bowler, and the left guard Elgin Jenkins having a very, very solid rookie campaign last year. But there's real question marks about the right side, right? You got Billy Turner at right tackle, North Dakota State kid who was drafted in the 3rd round and bounced around before getting his bigger deal with Green Bay. There's real question marks there, and his backup is Ricky Wagner, who there's probably even more question marks about now, given the contract that he received a couple of years back. So then you've got Lane Taylor, who, again, not a superstar by any means. So can the Vikings take advantage of the holes on the right side and still manage to get some pressure off the left side? I mean, if you can answer those questions with yes, and of course, and you probably feel pretty good about your chance to win this football game if you can get pressure off that right side. Right. So yeah. It's easier said than done, of course, but if you can get pressure, keep everyone not named Devontae Adams in check, and just let Aaron Jones become sort of non-existent because the Packers don't want to use him anyways, you probably have a pretty good chance to win this football game.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I am confident in Mike Zimmer and this defense, even without Hunter, to kind of keep the Packers in check. They've done that for how many games in a row now? It's been basically through the 2017 season dating back. Now, granted, 2017 obviously did not include Aaron Rodgers for about 6 or 7 of those quarters. But point being, Mike Zimmer seems to have the Packers figured out to where all right, it's really up to this offense to put up 24 points, 28 points, whatever the case may be. That's kind of where I am feeling about this game. The pivotal point, turning point, the X factor is going to be if Kirk Cousins can lead this team to 4 to 5 scoring drives, 3 of them touchdowns.
Well, let's jump in here right now.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Can Kirk Cousins lead 4 or 5 scoring drives against this defense? Now, we normally go level by level on defense, so let's do that again as we typically would. Starting with the 3 guys on the defensive line. This is a 3-4 defense for Mike Pettin, remember, of course. So they'll have 4 linebackers patrolling. Basically, Preston Smith ends up being a defensive end. But the 3 guys on the defensive line, you got Dean Lowry at the DN spot, so essentially a 5 technique. The nose tackle is Kenny Clark, the stud. Big deal recently. Probably one of the most dangerous pieces on their entire defense. And then the other 5 technique is Tyler Lancaster, who I don't have a whole lot to say about him.
One thing I will mention about Lowry, if I saw these are the type of things that what a good person would do is write down who the source is and then credit that person, but I didn't do that. But it might have been a Packers person actually, but it came across my timeline and they put together like a clip of Lowry both games last year, kind of sniffing out and staying disciplined on the play action rollout, right? Like that was big for the Packers in both of those games, was them defending the rollout play action game that the Vikings have been successful with all year long. And so he was really disciplined there. So that's an X factor in this kind of the X factor within the X factor would be Lowry, and whoever I guess would be charged with that assignment this year on Green Bay's defense, staying home and not letting Kirk get out of the pocket on those rollouts, instead keeping him there and forcing him to kind of, fall backwards away from the play, either throw the ball away or get rid of it or take a sack, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. It's really important, too, that the Vikings front 5 get a push. I mean, that's important every week. But Kenny Clark is most effective because he can take on 2 blockers and still get pressure, right? So if you are going to allow that to happen, allow a defensive guy to man 2 of your offensive linemen, he better not be getting a pressure as well. So really that's the difference here is when the Vikings are double teaming Kenny Clark up the middle, can they keep him from getting, messing up that pocket, murking up that pocket enough for Kirk Cousins where he can't step up and throw. That'll be a big thing to watch come Sunday. The other piece here is that, the linebacker, Preston Smith, and we're kind of getting into the second level here, coming down and being, one of the most dangerous, him
Preston
and Zadarius Smith.
And Zadarius Smith, both. It's just
2 of them being extremely dangerous coming from both sides of the defensive line as well. You don't know which one's going to have his hand in the dirt. You don't know which one's going to be over the middle. But you do know that probably one of the 2, if not, well, I shouldn't say one of the 2 because sometimes it's both. They're going to come after you. And there's going to be a lot of different fronts that the Vikings will look at. Mike Pettin employs multiple different types of stunts. The style in which these 2 guys have been deployed since the beginning of last season has basically different every single week. There's no trends other than the fact that these 2 guys are creating pressure. So you have to be concerned about that. If you're going to allow Kenny Clark to eat up 2 of your blockers, well, that means someone's going to be free, and you don't want that to be either one of the Smiths because chances are they're going to get home if that's the case.
Yeah, and we know how Kirk Cousins handles pressure. It's not awesome most of the time. So that's obviously a big part of this game too. And you could make the solid argument that the Smiths kind of wrecked the Vikings-Packers games last year in both cases. And again, I think the first game in particular was very much due to Kirk making a few mistakes. The interception in the back of the end zone is definitely one of those mistakes. But those things start with pressure. And so neutralizing those guys is going to be huge. Getting the running game going is going to be huge. And I don't think Dalvin's, had a huge problem with Green Bay before, but I think, that's I know in the Week 16 game last year against Green Bay, there was no Dalvin, there was no Madison,
right?
And there was virtually no running game. I don't know if that's a direct correlation, but it's certainly a big reason why the Vikings had like 4 first downs in that game was just because it was Kirk kind of doing what he, by himself, and Green Bay was right there waiting for the pass. So, and I would imagine too, as you kind of move to the linebacker spot, for Green Bay, they didn't bring back Blake Martinez. and I think to have Christian Kirksey in that role right now,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that's not quite filling that hole, you know, to the way you can. And I would imagine there'll be somewhat of a drop off there at Green Bay's second level in that 3-4 defense.
Yeah, especially because Kirksey's playing next to Oren Burks, Vanderbilt linebacker. So the two inside pieces are, I don't want to jinx the Vikings here, but neither of them are, guys that show up in the newspaper a lot, right? You don't hear much about Kirksey or Burks. That's because neither of them are super influential players on this defense, but they do have a role. And it's, for what it's worth, it's very hard to exploit inside linebackers, especially if you're able to get the pressure that that the two Smiths can get off the edge, right? It becomes a matter of, well, if you get to the second level, and that means, can the Vikings offensive line get enough of a push to give Dalvin Cook some space to make these, to make it hurt? The fact that they don't really have a lot of talent directly up the middle beyond Kenny Clark. Can you get past Kenny Clark? And if so, you might be running for a few days. So something to keep an eye on as we get into this third level of the defense now. Now, there is not necessarily star power here, but there's definitely name recognition within the secondary for the Packers, right? The four main names being the first round pick last year, Darnell Savage.
Yeah.
The acquisition from Chicago, a former fourth round pick in Adrian Amos, the other safety, and then the two guys on the outside. You got the former first round pick Jair Alexander, who never stops talking. And then you've got Kevin King, who I liked quite a bit coming out of Washington a couple of years ago. I believe he was also a first round pick or a second round pick.
Yeah, he was an early rounder. The Alexander, you mentioned him not stopping talking. He is like a light version, sort of like, I don't want to say Jalen Ramsey, but like it's kind of got that swagger to it.
I might say Jalen Ramsey. That might be fair.
Because like it's like, I'm not going to put him in that category, but it's sort of like if there was like a second tier of corners in the NFL, I think he would be the Jalen Ramsey of them, if that makes sense. Like talks a lot, and he kind of tries to get that mental edge on you. And he and Thielen have had some solid battles last couple of years. And same with he and Diggs. I think last year Diggs beat Alexander, I think, for at least one of his touchdowns. It might have been that. I can't remember if was it both of them?
I think it was two, yeah.
Yeah, he beat him for both those touchdowns. So it's not like Alexander is unbeatable, but he's certainly he is one of the better shutdown corners in football.
And he's a gambler too. He's dangerous in the same way that Marcus Peters is that he can jump right in front of a ball and take it to the house.
Right,
Once he gets the ball in his hands, it's very dangerous, and he has a knack for kind of jumping those routes, especially the comebackers. It's not the type of guy who's going to out jump you in the end zone. Like, you don't have to be super nervous of that. But he is a guy who's going to jump in front of a crossing route, for example, or a comebacker, that a wide receiver just didn't get enough of a step on. He is that type of player, and he really makes it hurt. But Amos was pedestrian last year in Green Bay, right? I mean, he was okay, but he was a stud, absolute stud in Chicago. And last year in Green Bay, he was just meh. He was all right. He was there. He was doing his job. And Kevin King, I think, is kind of the weakest link here. And the guy that, if you can find a way to get Thielen matched up on him, whether that's by using shifts, motions, whatever, that's the one-on-one that you want. If you can find a way to get Adam Thielen straight up on Kevin King, the Vikings are going to win that matchup, I think, 9 times out of 10. So keeping in mind, this group here on defense, what is kind of the biggest factor for you for the Vikings? Like, if the Vikings are going to win this game, what do they need to do against this defense to win?
I think it's going to be up to a second receiving option, whether that's Irv Smith, whether that's Justin Jefferson, Tajay Sharp, BC Johnson.
There isn't a lot of help to cover Irv Smith, by the way. That's might be a good point.
Anybody to kind of step up, because I think it's going to be fun, by the way, to watch Alexander and Thielen. I would assume that Green Bay will want Alexander to sort of shadow Thielen. We don't confirm that, and a lot of times when we hear, oh, he's going to shadow this guy, it doesn't happen 100% of the snaps. But I think if Kirk can find a chemistry with one of those other receivers this week, while Thielen wins his too, right, gets his against Alexander, I think that will help the Vikings quite a bit. Key third down conversions there where he doesn't have to force feed the ball to Adam Thielen. I think that'll be big. So that's kind of where I think this game's going to hinge, is which offense can find that second receiving option what behind their star and make the most out of that player, win the most matchups from that spot. And I think for the Vikings, I don't know. I would imagine BC is going to be the favorite to sort of get the most reps there.
Sure.
But if it's him, I don't care who it is, Justin Jefferson, Tajay Sharp, Irv Smith Jr. could be that guy as well. I think that's going to be key because the last couple of games, or the games last year, Vikings didn't get a passing game going besides a couple maybe explosive plays to Diggs. So kind of filling that spot is going to be important to me.
You also, on the offensive side of the ball, then with you taking care of the defensive side of the ball, if the Vikings defense, I should probably phrase that horribly, with you covering the Packers, how the Vikings offense can beat the Packers defense on the offensive side of the ball. Okay, you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm tongue twisted. I don't know what to say. Okay, so for the Vikings to beat the Packers offense, okay, to me, it kind of comes down to what the Vikings offense is doing too, right? So in my opinion, if Dalvin Cook has more rush attempts than Aaron Jones, the Vikings are going to win this game. Because to me, whoever controls the clock better.
The analytics crowd hates that take, by the way. The analytics crowd hates that take about the rushing attempts.
My point isn't that if your running back runs the ball more, you churn up more yards and therefore win. It's more that if your running back carries the ball more, it's probably because you're winning and you're running down the clock, right? So to me, that's the difference in this game here. Is Dalvin Cook or Aaron Jones used more? Because to me, if both of those guys got 20 touches, I like the Vikings' chances, right? I like the chances of Dalvin Cook rushing for an average of 4.5 yards and potentially having a couple explosive plays. The same can be said for Aaron Jones, I suppose. But to me, that's the difference maker here. Is the Vikings' offense efficient enough to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field, as we've been trying to do for, a decade now? Is the Vikings offense efficient enough to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field and keep Aaron Jones from, make him one-dimensional, right? We've been saying this for years. If you can make Aaron Rodgers run it one-dimensional, that's the best chance to beat the Packers. That really hasn't changed, since we started recording podcasts. So that leads us into our picks, and we'll start with this Vikings-Packers matchup. Who do you got?
I've said this before about these games. In the Vikings-Packers rivalry, I default to the home team, even though there's not much of a home field advantage in this game. I'm still going to take the Vikings just based on that fact. But I think, if anything tells us about, the history of this rivalry the last couple of years, it should be a good, fun game, close game. I'm taking the under too, so I'm hoping for a defensive battle that Mike Zimmer can pull it out in the end.
So I didn't say this at the top of our analysis, but the Vikings are currently at -2.5 on Bovada. So Vegas says the Vikings are going to win. I am going to agree with Vegas for a lot of the reasons that we've already stated, right? I think the Vikings are more built to win. I stand with what we said all of last year, that 13-3 was a fluke. I just don't think it's that complete of a Green Bay team. It's hard to win with 3 offensive players, and that's it. And that's what the Packers have right now. So I think the Vikings defense will do enough, and I think ultimately they'll get a win here. I think it'll be by a small margin. It'll be something like 24-17 or something like that. But I do.
By the way, I'm super curious to see how the Packers use AJ Dillon, or if they do at all.
Right.
Second round pick, and they've already been using Aaron Jones like way less than they should be. Because I think he was playing 55% of the snaps last year, with Jamal Williams also rotating in like way too often. And they draft this other guy. You have to justify drafting a running back that high somehow. So I'm curious about that. Not that AJ Dillon's bad. Like, I've never tried to say that AJ Dillon is a bad player. I just did not like the draft pick, and it made no sense to me. The fit's weird. So I am curious about that, because I don't have Aaron Jones in a lot of fantasy leagues this year like I did last year, but I would be upset if, Aaron Jones is surrendering even more of his touches to this rookie that they didn't need to draft at all.
Absolutely. So we're both on the Minnesota train for week 1. Let's get into the rest of the NFL here. If you weren't with us last year for our picks, basically what we do is we just give kind of a short blurb on each game, and both of us pull a pick out of our ass. That's kind of how this works. And then at the end of the year, Drew and I, check out the totals, and Drew usually wins. That's kind of how this thing
What
works.
do you have the records in front of you from last year or no?
I don't have them in front of me, but I know you
Okay.
beat me by about 16 games last
Yeah.
year.
Okay.
So it
All
wasn't
right.
close last year.
That part, the actual records aren't really important right now. We just got to get that part out.
All right. So the Thursday night game features your two very rich quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. This is games being played at Kansas City. Not that it matters all that much.
Hey, they got 2,500 fans, I think, or 12,000 or something like that. A small number of fans will be at this game.
All right. So who wins it? Super Bowl champs or the younger
City.
guys?
Houston, I just like what's there besides Deshaun Watson? I mean, you have
David Johnson and Brandon Cooks.
You have speedy receivers. You have
front.
Cooks and Fuller, who are speedy receivers. They run fast. They signed that Tunzel, right, to a long-term deal.
Yep.
I mean, is JJ Watt healthy? I don't even know. Half the time he's not healthy. I don't know.
Right.
So there's like here and there's like star players on the Texans, like Watson, Tunzel, Watt, but then like there's just after that the roster is not awesome. It's not awesome. And then that trade for David Johnson and getting rid of I will never understand that one. So I mean, and the Chiefs are unstoppable, it seems like. So I'm going Kansas City in big fashion.
I'm going with Kansas City as well for all the reasons you stated. And Kansas City's basically the same roster as last year, plus Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, they might be better this year. So I'm going to take Kansas City basically against anyone until proven otherwise. So Kansas City for Drew and I. Seattle and Atlanta is the next one up here on the docket. Russell Wilson against Matt Ryan. We are playing in Atlanta. Not that it really matters all that much. Seattle went through some changes. I guess Jadeveon Clowney departs. Devontae Freeman is no longer in Atlanta, so you're going to see some changes there as well. But it's still it's the Todd Gurley, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley show there. And then DK Metcalf answers his sophomore campaign with Tyler Lockett playing opposite him and Chris Carson, of course, in the backfield. So who gets out of this one alive?
I'll take Seattle. I don't love that pick though. But it's more about Russell. I think Atlanta's roster is actually better, but I think Russell Wilson just will make some stupid play to bring Seattle over the top by like a couple points at the end.
So I'm going to take Seattle as well, but I'm not going to use objective or subjective reasoning here. I'm just going to use the simple fact that Atlanta always loses week one, and we never can explain it. They always have like a great roster headed into week one, and they feel like a no-brainer bet, and then they find a way to lose. And Seattle's actually a good team, so I think they're going to find a way to lose here as well. I'm going to take Seattle too. So Drew and I are on the same picks through three here. The Jets at the Bills. I'm not sure that's going to change with this one.
Yeah.
Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs against Sam Darnold and Jamison Crowder and Denzel Mims.
Denzel Mims, I forgot about him. I'm picking Buffalo. I'm not on the Buffalo train as much as many other people are, but the Jets are that bad, so I'm picking the Bills.
I'm also going to go with Buffalo. I don't trust Josh Allen, but I also don't trust Sam Darnold. I mean, Josh Allen takes a lot of heat for his accuracy issues. Sam Darnold, what has he done? Why hasn't anyone, called him a bust yet? He hasn't done anything particularly well. I just don't think the Jets are that good. And Le'Veon Bell last year, least efficient season of his entire career. I don't expect that to change.
That is why you don't pay a running back.
Boom. There you go. It's the perfect commercial for it. So I'm taking Buffalo as well. Chicago at Detroit. This could be an interesting one. It sounds like Mitch Trubisky is going to be the starting quarterback for Chicago. They still have that very good defense, but the running back situation hasn't really been resolved. David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, who's going to be the guy there. And then Detroit has, a pretty efficient aerial attack, assuming Matthew Stafford doesn't have COVID-19. I mean, you've got Kenny Galladay out there. You got T.J. Hawkinson entering his second year. Marvin Jones, of course, returns to action. I mean, and then they've got three running backs. Kerryon Johnson's finally healthy again. Adrian Peterson, hilariously, is in Detroit. And there's one other guy
DeAndre Swift.
DeAndre Swift, the rookie out of Georgia, right? So you've got all of these different pieces for Detroit. That offense looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Who gets the win?
I think Detroit's winning this game, and I actually like Detroit a lot in this game. I don't know if you have the spread in front of you. This is what I'm going to consider now that I listen to all those weapons that you just listed off. Now, Chicago's defense is still good.
-3 for Detroit is the spread.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I see that. Okay. I was hoping Chicago would be favored or something stupid, but yeah, and if the Bears start Mitch Trubisky, I'm not picking them. Like I don't care who they play, I'm not picking them. So I'm picking Detroit, and again, I'm picking against the Bears unless they get a new quarterback. So that's the way it's going to be right now.
I'm going to take Detroit just because I think that offense is going to be sweet to watch. I mean, Matthew Stafford's no slouch, and he's got a lot of great pieces to work with now. And Chicago, I mean, they weren't that great last year. They're probably going to be. What reason is there to suggest that they're going to be better?
Yeah, no, there isn't one.
There isn't one. So I'm going to take
Montgomery, by the way, too, is out for 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks or something like that. So
okay, well, there you go.
Little 120-pound Tariq Cohen carrying the rock.
Yeah, I'm going to take Detroit too. All right, NFC East here. Philadelphia heads to the Washington football team. That's going to be. I'm going to say that wrong 50 times this year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be Dwayne Haskins under center against Carson Wentz. You've got a retooled. Well, honestly, both these teams are kind of retooled. I mean, Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson are still out there at wide receiver, but Jeffrey, of course, as always, is questionable. You've also got Jalen Reagor out there, the rookie who everyone was pissed about in Philadelphia that they selected in the first round. But Washington, and then you got Washington, what's the running back's name out of Washington that's making all the headlines now, especially Gibson, Antonio Gibson, right? So there's a lot of different pieces here. The main question in this game that kind of answers who's going to win it is: do you think Dwayne Haskins is any good, and does he have a chance now with Ron Rivera as his head coach?
Yeah, I mean he does. I think Washington will be a lot better this year, and I think one thing that's not being talked about is Alex Smith is on the 53-man roster.
Hilarious,
for Washington.
Ridiculous.
So that's I mean. I understand Washington not playing him, but like you wonder if they maybe wish the timeline would have been a little bit different and gotten greedy with Smith's return and been like, all right, let's actually play Smith here. Haskins can wait a little bit and develop a little bit more, but I'll take Philly. I don't love Philly this year either. I think that run that they had at the end of last year was just it's not going to be replicated. I don't even know who's their receiver right now. Like, did they add somebody? I mean, Alshon Jeffrey, I think, is still there. Jalen Reagor, okay. But, like, okay. So you have Jeffrey, who I think wanted to trade or was going to demand a trade, or they were trying to trade him or something, and then Reagor, and then you have who else?
Sanders and Howard in the backfield.
Howard's not there anymore. You have Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert is probably the best receiving tight end duo. But anyway, we're talking too much about the Eagles. They're going to probably win this game.
Boston Scott is the backup now with Howard.
Boston Scott. Yeah. I'll take Philly. I don't love either team, though, this year.
I'm going to take Philly, too. I don't like either of these teams. I just don't like Washington more. They're just bad. They always are. I mean, maybe they can turn it around, but until proven otherwise, they're bad, period. Next one here. We got the Las Vegas Raiders getting the opportunity to play on the road against the Teddy Bridgewater Carolina Panthers. Who do you got in this one?
Panthers. The Panthers are my sneaky number 7 seed playoff team this year in the NFC. Mostly because I just want to root for Teddy, but I think that offense could be sneaky fun with McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson now, Curtis Samuel. That could be a sneaky fun, and of course McCaffrey. So that's going to be a fun one to watch. I think the Panthers win this game.
Yeah, I'm taking Carolina as well. I think that Las Vegas is, not doing a terrible job rebuilding as much. Like John Gruden got a ton of crap or whatever when Khalil Mack got traded and whatnot, but he's done a pretty good job rebuilding this team. But they're certainly not there yet, right? They've got a couple more years. Henry Ruggs should be fun. I don't see an explosion in week 1 for him though. So it's going to be the Josh Jacobs, Derek Carr show. I just don't see that getting it done against McCaffrey and Bridgewater. So I'm going to take Carolina as well. So we are 100% in agreement so far. Heading into this next one, Indianapolis at Jacksonville. I don't really see that changing.
No. Jacksonville might go 0-16.
Yeah,
I've never seen
the 0-16 team.
Such disdain for an organization from players that just played on the team. Like every player that leaves has been talking, about that organization, and every good player that's there wants out. Like it's unbelievable. There's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know yet, and it's surprising that it hasn't been looked into more because, Yannick has had things to say. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Fournette,
Ronnie Harrison last week.
Harrison, yep. Like these guys, every one of them, they get out of there, and then they, say some stuff. And it's not a thank you to Jacksonville. I really appreciate everything you did for me. Blah blah blah. It's nah. I gotta get out of Jacksonville. My time is done. All this stuff. It's bizarre. I'm taking the Colts.
A very well-run organization, with the exception of the drunk owner, by the way, in Indianapolis.
Correct. Yes.
So I'm going to take Indianapolis as well. I don't think I need to justify that any more than you already have. So moving on to the next one here, Cleveland at Baltimore. The perception on Cleveland has dramatically changed since last year. And the perception on Baltimore, or specifically their quarterback, has also dramatically changed. This might be the 1B to the Chiefs' 1A in the AFC. So does Baltimore escape week one with without being upset by Cleveland and Baker Mayfield?
I think so. I do believe in the Browns this year, but not to the point where they're going to go on the road and beat Baltimore. So I will take the Ravens.
Yep, I feel the same way. I think that Cleveland will rebound. I do think that Beckham's going to have a better year, despite kind of the ridiculous news surrounding his name right now. I'm not going to talk about that, but feel free to Google Odell Beckham and see what comes up. But yeah, I'm going to go Baltimore. I think Lamar's going to have another great season, assuming he can stay healthy, and that offense has really only gotten better since last year with J.K. Dobbins. So I'm going to take Baltimore. Next one here. We got the Los Angeles Chargers against the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow against, I believe it's going to be Tyrod Taylor at least to start for the Chargers. Mike Williams is questionable. Keenan Allen is still there with his new contract extension. You got Austin Eckler is the lead guy in the backfield with Melvin Gordon gone. And Cincinnati just paid Joe Mixon. He'll start with, I believe, A.J. Green actually on the field opposite Tyler Boyd. So this could be an interesting matchup. Two swing teams here that did not play well last year. And they got the picks for that reason, but they could potentially be, a little bit different this year.
Yeah, the Chargers defense is loaded. There's a lot of guys on that defense. I'm going to pick the Chargers because of that. That's not a defense you want to go against in your first career start. I don't care how cool, calm, collected, cool Joe Burrow is. I think the Chargers defense will prevail here. But I do like the pieces around Burrow, and I think with time, he'll kind of, I don't want to say thrive, if that's the right word, but I think he'll come into his own.
He's going to have a good year.
Down the stretch of the season. I think week one against that defense is a little bit too much to ask.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to take the Chargers as well. And you talk about that defense. I mean, Linval Joseph hops over there back to being a true nose tackle with Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram next to him. And then you've got Kenneth Murray, the rookie, up the middle, Casey Hayward, Nazir Adderley, and Chris Harris in the secondary. Yeah, if I'm Joe Burrow, that's not the defense I want to face week one. I'm going to also take the Chargers. Now, this one I think is going to create a schism between us. And probably the biggest and most exciting matchup of the weekend, the NFC South week one matchup between the Buccaneers and the Saints.
Yeah.
Now, last year you called me crazy for saying all these things about this matchup. This year, we've got Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Rob Gronkowski, and A.Q. Shipley joining this roster on top of the fact that they already had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as well. They head to New Orleans to face off against probably one of the most complete rosters in the NFL, top to bottom. Drew Brees' potential swan song here, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas coming off a historic season as a receiver. Who do you have in this matchup of NFC South Titans?
See, the Brady to the Bucks thing is weird for me because it gives me this weird Favre Minnesota vibe, and that's the only reason I kind of have this high expectation for Tampa Bay. I'm going to pick the Bucks. I think there's a weird sense of like Bruce Arians and Brady could actually be awesome. And it's something that it doesn't seem like a fit really, right? Because Winston was sort of this let it fly down the field 50 yards without really looking at where you're throwing. And that's kind of the opposite of what Brady has been in New England the past couple of years. But for whatever reason, I think letting Brady kind of rip it a little bit more and kind of giving him sort of the green light to do that, I think might bring back some of the 2007 Brady type of performances. So that's more of a gut feeling than anything, but I'm going to take Tampa Bay for that reason.
All right, so I'm going to take New Orleans here. I like Drew Brees at this stage in his career more than I like Tom Brady. And I think that New Orleans is the best team in the NFL. They're my Super Bowl pick, and they really are. They kind of have been my Super Bowl pick for the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's going to be them and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I don't think Tom Brady's still good. I don't think he's great anymore. I think that Drew Brees can still be great. And to me, that's the differences between those two guys. Because, like you said, I mean, Bruce Arians is going to try to air it out. Sean Payton's going to try to do the same. And then you get two dramatically different running backs. I mean, I'm going to take Alvin Kamara's style of play over Leonard Fournette's all day long. So I'm going to take the Saints here, but I do think that this could be a really fun one, a 49-45 thriller or something like that. So the last 4 matchups here, let's run through these real quick. Arizona and San Francisco. I think San Francisco is probably the safe pick there.
Yeah.
And the next one here could be fun on Sunday. Yeah, this one is Sunday Night Football. Dallas against the Los Angeles Rams. Two big name organizations, big markets coming together on Sunday Night Football. I'm taking Dallas. Where are you going on that one?
Yeah, Dallas roster I think is the best in the NFL, and if Mike McCarthy can somehow coach not worse than Jason Garrett, they're going to be a real contender.
Yep, I 100% agree. The last two here are Pittsburgh at the Giants and Tennessee at Denver. I think I know where you're going in the Tennessee-Denver game. Where are you going in Pittsburgh, New York?
I'll go Pittsburgh. They, with Big Ben, imagine how they would have been last year, right? That defense is right. No joke. They had Duck Hodges at quarterback for a lot of last year. So they're going to be really good this year. And then I'll take Tennessee in that other game, although I do like Denver this year because I think they have that 2017 Jags, 2018 Bears, 2019 Bills vibe where they don't have a great quarterback, but that defense is good enough to carry them against a weak schedule. That said, Tennessee in that game.
I'm going to take Tennessee and Pittsburgh as well. I do really like Drew Lock. I want that on record week 1 here. I think he has the potential to be very good. I love his personality. The fire is so much fun to watch, right? But I do think that he will lose to Tennessee. And like you said, Ben Roethlisberger's return, that's huge for this offense. I mean, they basically were scoring 10 points a week. Now they can basically double that, if not triple that, with Roethlisberger's return. On top of, T.J. Watt leading that defense, they could be a very, very dangerous team in the AFC. So that concludes our picks for the week. We only disagreed on one matchup this time. I'm sure it will not be like that for the rest of the year. But that wraps up our first show for the 2020 NFL season here. Thanks as always for joining us. Like I said at the top, you can find us on the Daily Norseman, Climbing the Pocket Network, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere else you find your podcasts. And you can watch us on YouTube as well if you like. So thanks for joining us, folks, and we will catch you guys next week.